Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. Great to have you here today on this Total Wellness Tuesday, where the topic for today is what is healthier for you and your family? Is it fresh food? Is it frozen? Or is it cooked? So the reason why I wanted to go over this topic today is that with so many of us prepping our food, with making sure that we have enough stocked for at least a couple weeks at a time, given the current state and situation that we are in, a lot of people have been asking questions, is frozen okay? Is my family getting the same nutrition, or does it really have to be fresh food? And I shared a lot of what I was doing with my family, and of course I'm going to share that with you on today's episode. I always try to give you exactly what we are doing, and I always want you to know this too, is that there's a best way to do things, and then there's also a relatively best way to do things. And what I mean by that is this. Your job for you is to always do your best and the best that you can in life. It's not always your opportunity or ability to do the very best thing that is available. So I want to repeat that. Sometimes you have to do what is best for you in that moment as to what you are able to do, even if there is a better way of doing it. And I tell people that all the time. You can only be as good as you are able to be. And that's what we have to be a little bit more open to in the world as well. It's we have to understand is like we're only able to do the best that we can do. And then hopefully as we improve in life and as things get better and whatever it might happen in our life, then we can make even better choices, right? So there's a lot of things that I would love to have done when I was in my early 20s or even my late teens as to get better help for my own health, to be able to run more labs, to do all of those things. And I did not have the means to do that, even though there was a better way of doing things, right? I was in college and I knew that I should be eating better food, but what I had available was what they served in the cafeteria. So what I did was I made my very best choice of what I could eat for cafeteria-based food. And oftentimes that was just the salad bar and whatever I could get for some of the fresh food. And it was staying away from the things that I knew that were sensitivities for me, like gluten-based dishes, etc. So, and that wasn't easy, right? That wasn't easy as an 18-year-old trying to stay away from gluten and dairy and all those other types of things. But I made my best choice, and sometimes I still slipped up. It's just the way that it works in life. So what I want to share with you today is there is a best way for doing things, and we know that. We know that because at this point, if it's available for a fruit, for a vegetable, or for a supplement, something that we put in our body in terms of nutrition, it's been tested. Now, we'll continue to do more testing, but there's a lot of research on this. And I've done a show many podcasts ago on fresh versus frozen, but this is much more in-depth, the show here today. So I'm going to lay them out for you. I'm literally going to go through the pros and cons of each because there are pros and cons of each, contrary to what a lot of people believe. You should only eat raw food, or you should only cook food, or you should only eat grapes on Sunday, whatever the latest methodology is of the day. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to give you the truth, the unbiased look at what are the pros and cons of each one, and then you will be able to then make the best choice, again, for yourself and your family. So let's get right into it. What I want to share with you is first the pros of fresh food. And what fresh food is this. Fresh food would be in an ideal world, and again, in an ideal world, this is what you would do. You would go to a local farmer's market, and you would go up and you would meet your local farmer, your small farmer out there. And ideally, they would have organic food, right? They'd be organic produce. And you'd get your organic fruits and vegetables and sweet potatoes, whatever you might be eating. And that's fantastic. So you get all this fresh. And if you eat meat, you would look for grass-fed meat, or you'd look for pastured-based poultry, and then you'd look for some type of wild salmon. And you'd look for pastured eggs as well. That's the cleanest that we could eat, right? Those particular items, again, if you're a vegan, you're not going to go for the meat. If you don't eat meat, but you eat fish, you'll look for wild-based fish. That's what you'll do. I mean, that's ideal world. Okay, so let's say we don't live in that ideal world and we can't get everything organic. Well, I've shared with you before, if you can't get all organic, stay away from the dirty dozen. So if you can't get organic strawberries, just don't eat them. I mean, that's the truth. Don't eat pesticide-laden strawberries. They're so much unhealthier for you than not eating strawberries at all. Meaning, like, I don't believe that you're going to get a whole lot more benefits from eating strawberries that are laced with pesticide, and a lot of pesticides at that get absorbed all the way into the flesh, so you can't wash them off, than you would be with eating strawberries. Just eat another type of fruit. I mean, you don't have to eat non-organic strawberries. You can choose a different fruit, even if you love them, right? So choose the organic strawberries, still wash them, but you're not going to be able to wash pesticides off. So that's what we're saying. Stay away from the dirty dozen. And then the clean 15, well, those you could purchase non-organic if you had to, right? You'll make your best relative choice. So from May through November, there's a good 7 months or so, not quite 8, but about 7 months that we're able to go to a local farmer's market walkable from us. So super easy to do. Now, not everyone is that fortunate. So again, there's pros and cons of being in the city. And in Boston, right near my office and right near where our house is, that we are able to just walk to the farmer's market. We go to a particular farm that we like, that we just pay for essentially, not a co-op, but like a co-op, because we just guarantee them a certain amount of money. And I like doing that because I like to make sure that my local farmers are supported. So what I have is basically like a swipe card where I can just purchase whatever I want. I've already prepaid for it. So that's the best case scenario. It's there on Tuesdays and it's there on Fridays. So it's really nice. And I'm going to give you why it's important if you get it twice a week as we move down towards the cons in just a moment. So the pros of fresh food are this. One, you have all the living enzymes. So if you're buying fresh fruit and vegetables and you are eating it raw, well, you're getting the living enzymes within that nutrition that don't force us to have to use as many of our own. So that could be potentially a really great thing. Now, these enzymes are lost when you cook that fresh food above 118 degrees. Okay, so that does matter as well. So if you're cooking your food, you're losing those enzymes. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll talk about cooked food in just a moment. But there will be a loss of nutrients when you cook above that 118 degrees. Now, and again, I'll talk about when we get to cooked, there are benefits of cooking food as well. But fresh food and eating it raw can be highly beneficial. So for example, when we look at broccoli and we look at cauliflower and we look at onions and we look at, what is the other one that I'm looking for here? Onions and broccoli and cauliflower, cabbage. Cabbage was the other one I was trying to think of. Those right there are much more powerful in terms of producing their anti-cancer, antioxidants, and detox factors when eaten raw. And again, we'll go into this, so I'm going to have a little overlap, but the problem is they're pretty hard to digest. Onions, not so much, but definitely broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage can be a little bit more challenging when eating them raw. So although you might get more benefit in terms of the sulforaphane, let's say from broccoli, well, you can still get that sulforaphane when it is cooked. We just don't want to overcook our food. Now, so the nice thing is, if you can get fresh food, definitely have fresh food in your diet. A lot of people during the warmer months love being able to do salads, and I would agree. During the warmer months, great time to be adding in more of those salads. And of course, you can put fresh food right in your smoothie. And if you decide to use all fresh rather than frozen, well, you'll simply add some ice cubes for texture rather than frozen fruit in there, or even frozen veggies. So really, really nice. Okay, let's go over some of the downfalls, the pitfalls, the cons of fresh food. Well, if you do not wash your fresh food, not just meats and things like that, but actually your veggies, your produce. And I was talking about this on a previous Friday review, that there's a newer type of parasite, one that wasn't as common. It's much more common now on produce. So I do recommend that you still wash all of your fresh food, fruit, and vegetables. And the reason is that will hopefully remove a lot of that bacteria and microorganisms, such as parasites as well, if you were not washing it or even cooking it. Now, washing it will remove it from the produce. Doing an apple cider vinegar soak is fine as well. But if it's a meat, poultry, etc., fish, it should either be frozen or it should be cooked. I mean, that's very, very important, okay? So like a lot of, not, I shouldn't say a lot, very few raw foodists, people who only eat raw food, some do actually eat raw fish and raw meat. And I really do recommend, just because the amount of parasites, especially in fish, that you do freeze the fish for 3 days. I've actually gotten frozen salmon before, and this has only happened once. Pulled it out, saw for sure a worm, which is a parasite. Anyway, just letting you know, it's dead if it's been frozen for 3 days, but there are quite a number of parasites inside of fish, and that's why it really should be cooked. I used to love sushi. I would eat sushi twice a week, and I just don't eat sushi anymore because of what I know and all the parasite stool tests that I run. So I eat sushi. I shouldn't say that. I do eat sushi, but it's a vegan form of sushi, meaning or it's cooked, and that's what I have. Now, in terms of fish, I just make sure all of the fish that I do eat is cooked. Okay, some of the cons of fresh food as well is that it loses nutrients within just days of being picked. Now, here's the frustrating thing for a lot of people. And I'll talk about this more towards the end in terms of there's soil degradation. I mean, soil degradation has decreased our amount of nutrition. That means your, let's say, calcium and zinc and all your vitamins and minerals inside of your fresh food by anywhere from 18% to more than 80%. And this is just over the past 100 years. Well, here's the thing too. Those fruit, those vegetables start to lose even more of their nutrition when they're picked. And it's through a process called respiration. And it simply means this, that the fruit, the veggies, even potatoes, they start to, less so though with your root-based vegetables, they start to get dehydrated. They actually start to lose water and they start to release heat. And as this happens, they begin to lose their nutrition, okay? So their vitamins, their minerals, and especially more with the water-soluble vitamins, which is everything but vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. So believe it or not, most fruits and veggies can take anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks to get to your local grocer. And oftentimes, they aren't even picked fresh. So you're not getting vine-ripened fruit and veggies. So that's a huge issue. And then if you take them home and you don't eat them for 5 days, it's been found that within 5 days, 5 days in your refrigerator, nutrient levels can drop by sometimes 50% or more. And again, that goes mainly back to vitamin levels. So vitamin C is one that's tested quite often, B vitamins as well. Vitamin C can drop by more than 50%. It's unbelievable when I was doing the research. So how do we help this? Well, we keep the fruit in a crisper draw, same with your veggies, and that will help keep them a little fresh, a little fresher longer. And then what we do is we put our veggies, we put pretty much everything in the refrigerator, except for some fruit, like bananas, things like that stay on the counter. So that's typically what we're doing. We keep our potatoes out. Those are on the counter. And it's kind of a happy medium because our fridge is pretty much always stocked on those Tuesdays and Fridays with all sorts of great fresh food. One day people ask me, like, what do you eat? And I never take photos of any of these things, but maybe one day, certainly I can share that as well. So pros and cons of fresh fruit. The last thing I'll add to you is they're now allowing companies, believe it or not, to not have to sell their produce for 2 months to 12 months after being picked. That means sometimes apples could be sold a full year later, which is pretty insane. By that point, texture has changed, enzymes are starting to become lessened. You don't always know whether it's been frozen or not for that period of time, how it's been kept. So again, whenever possible, I do recommend getting out there to your local farmers market, support your local farmers, and absolutely do want to keep fresh food in your diet. Much of which can be easily digested, should be eaten raw and fresh. Ideally, a lot of that would be your fruit, such as apples and pears and berries, when you can get them fresh. So now we have frozen, and I want to go over frozen because I do quite a bit of frozen, and that's because I make a smoothie every day. So here's why I like frozen, okay? The big thing for me is that it's typically picked fresh. So a lot of times when you get your fresh food, it's not picked fresh. It's meant to ripen on a truck over the next week while it's making its way to your grocer. And then again, they never tell you that, right? So if you see green banana, well, that's the thing. It's like it was picked well before it was ripe. And then it went through either a gassing process where they gas the fruit or veggies to ripen, or it's been simply sitting there longer to ripen off the vine. If it's ripening off of the vine, it is not picking up extra nutrition at all. So you're not getting the full nutrition of your fruit and your veggies. Okay, Now, when it's frozen, let's go over some of those pros. It's picked fresh, and that means it's already picked ripe. So that's a big part of it. Now, sometimes I'll open up a bag of mangoes or pineapple and I look at it and I'm like, well, this was not ripe. And so it's not going to be as easily to digest. That's the thing. If something is allowed to ripen, it's also easier to digest on your system. With frozen, I also have easy access. I know every single time I go to make a smoothie, I don't have to be worried about being out of wild blueberries. I have them. Wild blueberries are only in season for a couple months, well, really just a month or so from mid-August to mid-September. And I'm fortunate I get to go to Maine and get wild blueberries where they're at. And so, of course, I eat them fresh at that time. I'll be having blueberries twice a day probably. But for the rest of the time, I have frozen blueberries. Oftentimes, for a couple months, I have so many fresh blueberries that I just freeze them. And those are my wild blueberries for the next couple months. And then when I run out, well, I just buy a bag of organic or wild blueberries. So super easy, simple to have stocked, and it's ready to go, and you know it was ripe. So the nice thing about frozen is that it's almost the same exact nutrient levels as fresh. That's the great thing about frozen. There's not a lot of difference. So I also feel really good about freezing it because I know that I'm getting the same nutrition for the most part. Now, slightly better nutrient levels if you go with raw and you go with organic and you're eating it within 5 days of it being picked. I'm not going to discount that at all. So I don't want to say that you don't get better nutrition with raw or with fresh within 5 days. Now, again, if you have your own garden, you can, and I have a mini garden in Maine. I'm very proud of that little mini garden. And I pick things a half hour before we're going to have them for dinner. Wash them, clean them, and we're eating them within 30 minutes. Now, you can't beat that, but that's not sustainable for most people, although it would be great, for everybody to even start their own little garden with even just a few foods. Like I don't have a lot in Maine right now. I'd love to be able to have more, but when we're up there, I'm basically growing a lot of the things that I like to have and my family likes to have on a near daily basis, and that's carrots, and it is, we had radishes last year. We've got all sorts of different types of lettuce and chard, and so great, easy things that we can begin to start to have our own little mini garden. And it does not take a lot of effort, that's for sure. So the cons of frozen food is this. It's lower on enzymes, okay? It's not completely devoid all the time, but it's definitely lower on enzymes. And the longer the fruit's frozen, typically the lower the enzymes as well. So not a lot of enzymes in there for sure. There's sometimes a loss of nutrients as well, and that's because there can be water loss, and with that, we're going to lose some of the nutrients too. And this is mainly, again, those water-soluble vitamins. So with frozen food, also, if it's going to be used to cook, you do have to pre-plan because oftentimes it needs to be thawed ahead of time. So it's just something to think about. And then with other, like if you are kind of prepping ahead of time and freezing, it oxidizes as well. So it's something that we don't like to often talk about, but let's say that you chop up bananas and you freeze them ahead of time. We oftentimes do that. The problem is they don't freeze instantly when you put them in the freezer. So the enzymes that are released by cutting those cellular walls begins to release the enzymes, and so there's oxidation that takes place with the oxygen itself and then the enzymes breaking down the food. So it's not ideal. I mean, again, it's your best relative choice, but it's not ideal. So I typically like to use fresh banana in the smoothie when I do that. Not as much frozen, but frozen is always there in case we need it to make acai bowls, etc. The other part is people sometimes blanch their fresh and then freeze. Blanching is basically dropping in hot water just for a short amount of time and then freezing. I don't like to do this because a lot of the water-soluble vitamins are then lost and it does change the texture. So I'm not an advocate, but I know some people do it. So that is the pros and cons on frozen. I'll give a quick summary at the very end of what I do personally. And then cooked, there's pros to things that are cooked. People, often deny this, but in Ayurveda, they knew this many thousands of years ago. They ate some things fresh. They used to do pressed juices many thousands of years ago. So when you look at it like this, we know that there's benefits to fresh, but there's also benefit to cooked. And the pros are that it's easier to digest. Most foods are easier to digest when you've already broken down the toughness of meat or the cellular walls of vegetables, especially cruciferous vegetables. So you use less energy for digestion, which is why people in our practice, if they have gut-based issues, we're recommending a cooked food diet or smoothies in the morning. Smoothies is basically blended to, I always call it like baby food, to water. I mean, it's very easy to digest even though it's raw. And so that's a really nice way to do it. You can get some of your raw foods in there, frozen, raw, and then you get your cooked meals until you improve and your digestion. Grains, in my opinion, should always be cooked. I don't think that they do well raw. Overnight oats is basically like cooking them. I mean, you're soaking them, you're allowing them to not quite ferment, but get to that point. When people use a ceviche or ceviche type recipe, you're cooking it as well. So these are just kind of different forms. But they should be broken down. So when I say grains should be cooked, they essentially should be broken down. That's the best way. You're also going to remove a lot of those. You're going to remove a lot of the lectins and what people call anti-nutrients as well. Now, again, there could be benefits to grains for some people. So I don't think that any human being needs to eat grains, but I've certainly seen a lot of benefit from people adding in some oatmeal to the diet or some rice, etc. And especially for the ectomorph body type. Okay. For meat and fish, I just really believe that they should either be frozen and then thawed and eaten raw if you really want to do that, but you have to kill those microorganisms and you have to kill the bacteria on them. If not, it only takes one. That's it. It only takes one time and you can get really sick. And the amount of parasites in fish, and yes, some meat, is pretty extraordinary. So again, either freeze it for 3 days and then let it thaw, or simply cook it. And that's what I recommend. And if you're not cooking the middle through, well, again, then that should have been frozen previously to get rid of any of those microorganisms. Cruciferous vegetables, as I mentioned earlier, are more potent in terms of anti-cancer nutrients. However, very hard to break down. Anybody that's eaten a plate full of raw broccoli can, for the most part, tell you, yeah, it's pretty hard to digest. So again, what I've said before is sometimes I'll take a little bit of a hand grater, a very fine hand grater, and shred the raw broccoli, just the sprouts on top, onto like a Buddha bowl if I'm having that for lunch, but still very bitter. Remember, a lot of veggies before they're cooked, especially cruciferous vegetables, are very, very bitter. That bitter shows the powerful nutrition they have in them, but still bitter. So I'm typically cooking my cruciferous vegetables and I'm using, supplements for a lot of the sulforaphane as well, but I'm getting that again, still through my nutrition. So the cons of cooked foods are that the enzymes are lost. So you are using your own natural stomach acid. You are using your own natural enzymes to be able to break down these foods. But again, cooking will help with some of that as well. A lot of the water-soluble vitamins are lost, but it's not always tremendous. And I'll give you the ways to cook them. So the vitamin loss can actually be between 10% or so of water-soluble vitamins. Again, that's basically every vitamin except vitamin A, D, E, and K, which are fat-soluble. Those seem to be preserved just fine through cooking. But the water-soluble vitamins could be 10 to 50% or more. So how do we then improve our cooking so that we preserve more of those water-soluble vitamins? So that if we want to cook our food, we can and still kind of get the best of all worlds. Well, the worst thing that you could do is cook something at very high heat or boil it. So if you boil, a lot of those vitamins end up in the water. So unless you're using that water to then boil rice in and let the rice absorb all the nutrients, then you're losing a lot of the nutrients, okay? So really, really important. And then again, Ayurveda slow cooked their foods. When I was over in India, when I was over in Sri Lanka, everything was slow cooked. They started dinner preparation basically right at lunchtime. I mean, they were slow cooking foods for 3 hours or more. So really, really impressive. Slow cook, gentle stir fry, any of those things are completely fine. A little light saute, completely fine. And what we found is that actually cooking some of the foods, although water-soluble vitamin levels can drop, antioxidant levels actually increase. So some of those antioxidants would be something like tomatoes. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of vitamin C in some raw tomatoes. But the lycopene levels, which is one of the antioxidants in tomatoes that have been shown now to help with prostate cancer and potentially breast cancer, it actually becomes more bioavailable when you cook the tomato. So really interesting. And so what's my summary on all this, right? There seems to be good things and bad things to all of them. And that's the truth, right? That's the truth of trying to stay unbiased, right? Trying to be truly integrative. What do we mean? Like, what do we do? Well, here's what I do. I eat fresh food that's easier to digest. So I will eat easier to digest lettuce and items like that. I'll have raw carrots are okay with me. They're not okay with everybody. Raw celery is okay with me. Again, doesn't always digest with everyone. I'll do raw frozen fruit in my smoothies. I typically still do an apple a day. What I've been doing lately is I've been having an apple in the morning and then I've been having a smoothie, but I'll only put like 1 cup or just a little over 1 cup of fruit in my smoothie. And then I have the other cup, which is basically an apple. So Those are raw, really easy. And then in terms of my frozen, I just spoke about that. The only time I have frozen food is really in my smoothie. But lately, what we've been doing is we have bags of frozen veggies. Some of them are just pre-bagged frozen veggies because it's super easy. It takes 20 minutes to cook at dinner. And we always have that, by the way, for my family. So if we're ever out of veggies, we always have a mixed bag of veggies in there. We always have frozen broccoli always in my refrigerator. So we can just make that for our girls and for my wife and I. And then for prep time right now, what we've been doing is we've been going to the grocery food stores and everybody's buying all the canned goods and we're buying basically the fresh food and we're just chopping it up and essentially freezing it to be able to keep it fresh because we know after 3 to 5 days of not using it, it starts to wilt, it starts to lose its nutrient power, so we might as well freeze it and then we just saute it that night for dinner. Just gently cook it or put it in the oven as well. So, and then easy, and then again, my lunch, besides in the warmer weather where I will do a salad, is mainly cooked. And it's easier to digest. I don't get any bloating. I don't get anything like that. I know the nutrition is very bioavailable. And then this is also why I tell people, listen, the soil has degraded so much so that we're losing anywhere from 10 to up to 80% of nutrients in the soil. Then if you don't get your fresh food within 5 days, you're losing nutrients. And it's why I can't recommend enough, again, what I do in addition to my whole food diet. Now remember, whole food diet always comes first. I always want to be clear on that. Eat good food, eat good, nutritious food, right? But it's also why I do the daily foundational protocol level 2. Simply because it's a fail-safe. When people tell you it's this much nutrition and vitamin C inside of your food, I would say, well, there's a little asterisk next to that. That means that was tested within basically hours of it being picked off the vine. And you're probably not eating it that way, right? So here's what I do. I simply do my daily nutritional support every single morning. It gives me 100% of all my vitamins and minerals that I need for the day. Now I know I'm covered, so I can just feel good about that. It's not mega doses, it's just everything I need. And then the daily fruit and vegetable blend is 22 organic fruits and vegetables, and I get the nutrients from that. So the thing is that most of us only eat 3 to 4 different types of vegetables at max per given day. So we don't have a huge variety, so then that gives me a variety. And then, of course, I get my omega-3s if I'm not always doing a lot of fish, because the only way that you're getting those omega-3s really are from that, because everything else is going to contain higher levels of omega-6 along with what you eat it. And then I do the daily probiotic support to get some of that good bacteria in my gut, where typically you would get from not really washing your fruit and vegetables and eating the little bit of dirt that's still on it. But we don't do that as much nowadays because the potential microorganisms, parasites, etc. So that's why, again, I can't recommend enough a really great whole food diet, and then simply just making sure you have your fail-safe in place, which I use as the daily foundation protocol level 2. But everybody should do what they feel is best for them. And then one last caveat I'll add is that using a daily digestive enzyme, which makes it then daily foundation protocol level 3, helps you break down your food to a greater degree and extract more nutrition. This is what I consider the best of combining functional medicine, orthomolecular medicine, which is the study of vitamins and minerals and nutrients, with a whole food diet. There's no reason why you have to do one or the other. One or the other doesn't have to be best. They can both work together, right? That's creating great synergies so that your body gets everything that it needs, and that goes for children and adults. So hopefully this has been helpful. Always happy to answer your comments and questions over at cabralsupportgroup.com, which is our free Facebook group, or even over on Instagram on that day's post. Take care, everyone. Have an amazing day. And as always, please do feel free to share this information with anyone you believe it could serve. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing, and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests, or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.